Camera's kind of close this morning. Well, you might find this interesting. I'm not very flexible. Just ask my wife. I made a couple of these straps up. And one goes around my calf. And like that. These are 45 grains of AR comp. Nice load in my gun. We've got a Desperado IPSC guy at 100 yards. Well, that's about as good as it gets for my sight picture. Okay. Quarter-inch AR 500, 100 yards. You can see the effectiveness of this 1942 M-1 Garand, and it also has some national match parts on it that we're going to talk about.
Toad Shooting Show is sponsored by inflation. Hornady 6.5 Creedmoor, $53.99 a box, or $2.70 per round. CCI Bench Rest Primers BR2, $99.99 for 1,000, or 10 cents a piece. Or you can step up to the BR4 for $120.99, or 12 cents a piece. Hornady Matched Ammunition 338 Lapua Magnum, $180.99, or $9.05 per round. Lapua Cinar 223 Remington 69 grain hollow point, $134.99, or $270 per round. Wait, there's more. Shooting not your thing? How about fishing? We can put you in this beautiful spinning rod, normally on sale for $549.99, now reduced by 20%. You can get this fishing pole for $439.99. You're going to need some chest waders, $899.99. If wading's not your style, how about this beautiful Tournament Series Lund boat for $22,000? A $68,430 truck should tow it nicely. And now that gas is over $3.10 a gallon, and if you use your charge card, it's more like $3.50 a gallon, you'll be paying $150 a weekend in gas.
Okay, so this is the 50-cent tour of the 1942 M-1 Garand. We're going to check it. It's clear, no rounds in the chamber. First of all, loading. I've seen some people prefer to have the round on the outside, and some people prefer to have it on the inside closest to the shooter. I like it better on the inside. It makes no difference whatsoever, but I like it on the insides because when I press down on this, it eliminates the chance of me cutting my finger. I don't have a problem out here. I have a problem with my finger getting wore on the inside here. So I like it this way. Other people like it the other way. And there may be an indication there for that 7th round stoppage that they talk about. And I've experienced it a couple of times on this gun, but it's not been a deal breaker for me. So loading this. Don't have to worry at all about M1 thumb because, you know, the end block is going to keep that bolt from coming forward even if it did release. So there's a couple of things that happen when you load this. The first thing is that you're going to push down and there's spring tension, and that spring tension comes from the op rod spring, okay? So as you're pressing down, the tension gets more and more, and you will find, I don't know if you guys have one of these, but if you have one that you need to pull back on the op rod a little to get it to latch, chances are it's one of two things. It's either a bullet guide is out of spec, or your op rod spring has compressed to the point to where it's no longer a spring. It's more like a solid piece of 3 coils. So once you change that spring, you might find that that's going to correct your loading problem. So timing. When people talk about timing on these rifles, what they're talking about is the sequence of events that happen when you go to load the gun. So the first is properly timed rifle. You're going to push down, and what's going to happen first is the clip latch is going to engage, and then in a microsecond, like within 1,000th of an inch after that, the op rod is going to release, and the round is going to be chambered. Now, let's just say you have a ceasefire, okay? For one reason or the other, you have to unload your gun. You just grab the round that is in the chamber, you pull back all the way on this op rod, and on this side of the gun, there is a clip latch, and you just depress it, and what that does is that releases the end block. Now, if I wanted to load 3 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever, say 4 there. If you have them staggered in place, and there you go, they're staggered, you can put them in. And now you got to be a little bit careful about loading this, but you can clip latch. Okay, now we've done that with 4. How about just 1? 1 round, I usually just kind of slide it in, push down on the follower just a little bit, and you can load 1 that way. Now, probably a good idea whenever you have a semi-automatic with a free-floated firing pin to use mil-spec primers on these. So these are heavier cup primers, because any of you AR guys out there, you know that when you chamber around on an AR, just the inertia from the firing pin sliding forward will put a little bit of a dimple. And this gun is no different than that with the free-floating firing pin. So the way you can alleviate that with hand loads is make sure that you are using a hard primer cup. And you'll get that with magnums and like CCI mil-spec primers. They'll do the job for you quite nicely. So that's the function of the rifle. And diagnosing a couple of problems on the gun, we have there's a couple of things that can go wrong with this rifle, one of which is op rod springs are cheap. I got this one from Fulton Armory, and that was causing a problem with trying to get the M block to latch. The only way that I've had two M1s that the M blocks wouldn't latch unless I pulled back on the op rod. Now that's not the way the gun is supposed to be designed. So they want you to be able to work with one hand. You engage it, and then you coax it forward a little bit. There's nothing wrong with helping it forward a little bit. But so op rod spring will clear up a lot of problems. And another very, very affordable spring is the clip latch spring right here underneath this. And I'll show you about that. And I think if you watch previous videos, this is a national match that was put together in 1962 or so, around there. The national match program ran from 1953 to 1963, so this is kind of a late 1962 Type 2 national match. Now, there are authentic national match rifles that were made at the Springfield Armory. They went back to Springfield, and there were other national match rifles that use all the same parts and a number of the same procedures, but there are a couple of nuances that make them different. And authentic collectors of national match rifles, they look for certain things, like on the early Type 1, there's just a few things that are changed on them, and then on Type 2s, they're kind of like the epitome of modifications you could make to this rifle to shoot competitively. And they worked out a lot of bugs when they went through the national match process, like taking some of the vibration out of the gun, tightening up the groups, improving the sights, betting the actions, and I'm going to just kind of go over a little of that with you if you're interested. So this rifle, it disassembles kind of easily because it does have bedding. You have to, the trigger guard requires a little bit more tension because everything is a much tighter fit. I've had some of these that I took the trigger guard out of and the whole thing just falls right apart. This one here, you can tell it's a really tight fit there. So that's one of the benefits of bedding. The next thing is if you want to, I'm going to take the receiver out of the stock. I take my thumb and I'm in the mag well here, and I'm pushing at the same time, and you can just see how tight of a fit that is. And that forearm hooks underneath this ring here, and we're going to talk about that ring in just a second here. Okay, so you separate the two, and they don't want you doing this too often with a national match, because what you do is you end up wearing out that bedding a little bit. So this is what the bedding looks like on a national match job. The receiver sits right on top of this glass bedding. There's an area in the back here, and you'll notice that the color of that is brown, and you'll also notice that there is a number in here that coincides with the serial number on the gun. So, very well worn stock, and one of the things that determines that this is not a Springfield Armory national match is that the bedding color is brown. The Marine Corps and the United States Army armorers, when they were prepping these guns for the guys that were shooting at Camp Perry competitively, they used a brown bedding. Springfield used a yellow or a beige colored bedding. So that's a pretty much a definitive, this is a type 2, but this was not done at the Springfield Armory, which does reduce the price that this gun could have, as if it's an authentic Springfield Armory national match, they're going to bring more money than one that was done by another armorer. Are the form and function the same? Absolutely. In some cases, probably even better. But it doesn't matter to me. The gun shoots pretty well. And this is another tell that it was done at the Marine Corps or Army and not at Springfield Armory. If you'll notice right here, what Springfield did with this ring is they bonded it with bedding material. So they bonded this ring to this upper handguard. And what Marine Corps and Army guys do is they use a couple of screws here. They use mechanical fasteners to accomplish the same thing. Now, which is better, I don't really know, but that's a definitive thing that wasn't done at Springfield Armory because they didn't use screws like that. So the era of this assembly being 1962, the reason why I know it's in that time frame is Remington Arms made the op rod for this. And on the number here, there's a number right here that depicts around 1962 was the time that operation rod was put into service on these rifles. So they do also have numbers in here that coincide with the serial number on the rifle. So they did a very nice job of almost like identical to the way the Springfield Armory National Match Rifle would be done, but unfortunately it was done by someone else other than Springfield Armory. The rear sight, this is a hooded rear sight, and they do have specific markings on them. And for your older eyes, if you can order one of these from Fulton Armory, and they offer 2 different size diopters. I would recommend getting the larger size diopter because for your older eyes, you're not even going to be able to see through the smaller one. That smaller diopter was for, eagle eye vision, 20 to 25 years old, say 18 to 25 years old, and we're kind of past our prime here. So if you're going to get one of these hooded sights, they work out very well. You can have 1/2 of an inch MOA increments of adjustment because the hood, you can turn it, and that grabs you an extra 1/2 MOA one way or the other. The function of this rifle and disassembly. Let's take a look at that real quick. First thing up, we'll take a look at the follower rod and op rod spring. This op rod spring can be the problem that doesn't allow you to just cycle the gun as designed. If you have to pull back on your op rod at all to get the end block to latch, there's a good chance that this is what's wrong with it, is the spring. Because a spring, if the coils become compressed into one solid mass, it's no longer a spring, it's just a lug or a shim. And a lot of the functions of this gun are almost broken down into thousandths of an inch. So when you have something like that that's out of sorts, you can sort that out. You can go with, I would go with the mil-spec spring. I wouldn't go with the heavy-duty spring. I would just go with the one that originally, the original spec. Going with a heavier duty spring is really not necessary. And so another spring that you should get is the clip latch spring. Easy change there. You know, it changes so easy. When you start working on these guns, you just be amazed how serviceable they are. I mean, you just take that out. You can replace that spring right here and then reinstall that. These things are like the ultimate gun to work on. They're really intimidating when you first get them. But then after you have one for a little period of time, you're like, this gun is a piece of cake to work on. Okay, so we've discussed those two springs that you should change, and Fulton Armory has a full line of inventory for these to service your rifle. But buy what you need, don't buy what you don't need. So a couple of springs, that's a good one. And this pen actually has three different assemblies here that it houses. So let's take a look at that real quick. The one that came out of here was slightly out of spec, so I ended up buying a new one. And that extra thousandths of an inch, you wouldn't think that it would make a lot of difference, but stop and think about like your car door. Once the hinge pins start to wear, you'd have to start picking up on the back of the door. It's slamming on the latch a little bit differently. These pins are no different. There's a specification. So for the cost of one of these pins, just get a new one that's within spec. So now you're still into this, servicing of your rifle at a reasonable price here. So this pin is going to house, this is the op rod catch. It has an accelerator, op rod catch, accelerator, and there's this little arm here that goes underneath the clip latch. Rarely are these bad, okay? So you can almost like take that out of your equation in most cases. This is the follower arm. Check it for straightness, check it for wear, you might not have any problems with that. And there's a camming surface right here. And then you have your bullet guide. Now the bullet guide, this is a very interesting thing that when you discover actually how close the tolerances are for as sloppy as this gun is. These guns would go back into the armory for timing issues, and what the armorers were instructed to do was put these on a hard surface and peen this area to increase the height of this nose right here. So they would peen these up a little bit, and there's a specification of the height from the base to that top of that nose. So that's about as deep as you need to get into it. Make sure that this is in spec. Change a couple of springs because that would be basic maintenance. And then, inspect anything to see if it's wore. But I guarantee for probably 90% of the time, using statistical data, that sometimes people use statistics in a totally incorrect way. I would say that about 9 out of 10 times, if you change that op rod spring, change that clip latch spring, make sure that this nose on the bullet guide is at the proper height, that you're probably going to have a functioning rifle once again. There is a tilt test that you can do. Now that the guts are removed, this is the follower, and you just test that and make sure that it's sliding forward and rearward. Of course, gravity kind of got a hold of me there for a minute. 1 minute. We'll do it this way so it, okay. Very super easy guns to work on once you become familiar with them. Follower goes in. We're going to put the bullet guide in sort of loosely. And we'll take the accelerator. The accelerator goes underneath. There's a little arm in there for the clip latch. There's your follower arm. It drops down in nice. You got a pin that holds it all together. Sometimes you got to wiggle it around a little bit. 1 minute, please. There we go. And then we have our op rod spring. Goes into this area here. The stock hooks in the front here. One of the drawbacks of, having to service these rifles, it's like catch-22 because they don't want you, taking that bedding out every time or taking the action out of the stock, because you do end up wearing the bedding just a little bit. But I think for the sake of being able to have a well-serviced gun, that's the trade-off of it. And aim right in the middle of the circle. That's better.